Welcome to episode 47 of The Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week, I speak to a friend of mine, the road racer Trevor Daley. Many of you won't know Trevor, but he's the epitome of what I think a racer should be. He's raced with broken everything's hands, hips, feet. He builds his own bikes. He finds the money to go racing, and he's got a day job where he runs a fabrication shop that makes a lot of the equipment that you'll find in the pits of the top Moto America road race teams. He's an amazingly talented guy, a really good guy. And in a week and a bit from now, Trevor's going to be racing the Daytona 200, a once great race that fell on hard times that's making kind of a slow, sustainable comeback. So Trevor and I talk all things about the 200, about what it's like to ride in the banking, pit stop strategy, and also the mindset of going down and racing 200 miles flat out. But first, a word from our sponsor. Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. Well, it's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brake rotors, lights and tire exhaust systems, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay. Things people love. The Lowdown Show is presented by adbrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. You are the toughest human I've ever met, and I've seen you do some things on a racetrack that are sort of the other side of insane, including pushing a race bike off the track with two broken wrists. But you are unusual. It seems like a lot of racers these days come from, because it's so mind-bendingly expensive, a lot of racers come from families with money, with trucking companies or aviation companies or logistics or whatever. And you've really always done it on your own. You run a fabrication shop, you work on motorcycles, you build race bikes. A lot of your stuff is in the Moto America paddock, work stands and tire stands and that sort of stuff. But racing really is, I mean, you got married this year, so you're showing a little bit of range. But racing really has been your life for a long time, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. I think it was 20. I didn't get into bikes definitely until kind of later in my racing career. I grew up riding a dirt bike. Grew up around that a little bit, but never the street bike, never the race bike side of things. At a young age, I started racing karts and transitioned into cars kind of in some later years with me behind the wheel. And then, like I mentioned, kind of transitioning more into the industry side of it. But yeah, it's a bit of an all encompassing thing in a sense. And, some days it can be a bit trying, but for the most part, it's, I love it. It's my life. And yeah, always, whether it's my own bike, whether it's a customer project or like you mentioned, some of the, pit equipment that I'm fabricating for some of the teams in Moto America, it's always awesome to have an opportunity to learn, number one, and to be exposed to, some really high level, again, whether it's people or programs within racing in all different forms. And like I said, to be able to learn from that and then, apply it and build some cool stuff with that knowledge.
What's it like the first time you go out? Now you got way more nerve than I do, but what's it like the first time you do a lap at Daytona and hit the wall?
It's pretty wild. Yeah. Like, you see it on TV. It's, none of that does it justice. It's, I don't even know if you were to go out there and walk, because when you're entering for the first time on Wednesday for the pit setup, they actually bring all the trucks and transporters and whatnot onto the track partway down the back straightaway. And you actually run the apron the entire way around into the pits. And, you're sitting there moving little by little, waiting for everyone to kind of pull into their garages and whatnot and slot in. And, the whole time you're looking up at the Daytona painted on the outside wall and the banking. And even that, to be honest, doesn't do it justice until you ride around there at some sort of pace or speed. And a couple of years ago, I went down and did a track day there late in the fall, kind of to get my head around what I was going to come back and do last year at the 200. And the first laps I actually turned on the track were on my super bike. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, because it was an eye opener for sure. Going, well over 200 miles an hour, in the banking into turn one, and the thing spinning while you're doing that, was a bit of indoctrination for sure of what I was going to be in for, in a sense, on the smaller bike.
And then I think you told me on the big bike, and now it's a GSXR 1000, a bike close to 200 horsepower. But I think you told me that the G-force was so much that you said you had trouble sliding back to get in a tuck.
It is, yeah. Yeah, that was definitely something to get used to, something that, you're not used to feeling at a lot of the tracks that I've run in the past or run up here. And, I've been fortunate that I even raced at Indianapolis a few years ago, but, you don't use the section of the track that has the banking. And again, the banking at Daytona is massive. So yeah, that bike, like I said, I was just kind of turning some laps and get my head around the track, and didn't really have it there to do some ultimate lap time, and didn't necessarily have it set up for the conditions in the banking. And yeah, as you're accelerating around there and, you're looking forward, you can feel the whole bike compressing to the point where on that bike, I could almost hear the belly pan dragging in the banking. And, when you recognize what's happening, and like I said, knowing how fast you're going, and it being a practice day or a track day, it was one of those things where it's like, I don't think I really need to push the limit here, or do this, right? But, like when you're fully tucked there, that G-force isn't just obviously through the bike, it's through you too. So, as the bike starts moving around a little bit, it actually takes a fair amount of energy to put yourself move yourself into a place to try and stop some of that movement, and that was definitely something that, if anything, looking back at it, I was really fortunate that I kind of ran into or felt, I guess you could say, right off the bat, because doing the 200 is such a long race that, little things like that fatigue you. There's tire wear and stuff like that it makes a difference for too. But, that was, I was fortunate. Obviously my teammate, Ben Young, last year had done it a few times. And he had said that to me Saturday morning, that, there's, you run every lap in full tuck and trying to, get the most mile an hour and the most slipstream. But when it comes down to it, if you get a cramp or, your arms get tight or something because of that, you're worse off. So, some of his advice was to, take a boot off the peg and stretch your leg out, before you run into cramping and stuff like that. And it was definitely something I did through the race, which helped.
When I was a kid, the Daytona 200 was the race. It was one of those, all the Europeans came over, Kenny Roberts and Giacomo Agostini and, Steve Baker. And then the race went through a long sort of period where it sort of fell out of favor, and they no longer ran the big bikes for the 200 miler, and it came down to medium displacement bikes like your GSXR 750 we can see right there. But what was your first sort of introduction to the Daytona 200? What do you remember about it?
Well, I've been, fortunate to be going to Daytona for several years. Probably mid 2000s is the first time I was there in a much different capacity with a 4-wheel program, in an endurance, working with an endurance racing team, a Canadian-based prototype team, and doing the Daytona 24 hours, which is, 650 something laps, a little bit more than the 57 we turn in the 200, but, a bit of a, eye-opening experience, or definitely something like, jumping 15 years forward, last year in some of my preparations and some of the mentality taking into the race, whether it was some of the stuff I fabricated and just kind of planning for the stuff that you can't plan for, because it happens. And, it'll happen in 57 laps on a bike. It'll happen in 24 hours in the car. But as far as the Motor America 200, I've always kind of been one, probably up until the last couple of years, where I've been doing a lot of indoor training through the winter. I've never really been one to watch racing. it always almost made me anxious to watch World Superbike or MotoGP. I just wanted to do it. It almost annoyed me. And I just kind of I honestly kind of never did. And obviously again, last year, going down there and running a track day, but then also, from that point in October until the buildup into March, definitely went back and watched a bunch of the racing from previous years to kind of get my head around it, because, you never really, like I said, you don't know how wild the banking is until you ride it. You don't know how you're going to feel after 30 laps, not to mention 56 laps, until you do it. Right. So I wouldn't say, I had, I to be honest, I can't really remember what my initial introduction to the race was, but yeah, like I said, from some of my other stuff in my past, I felt like, maybe for someone going down there for the first time last year in 2024, I had a little bit better concept maybe of the what ifs. And like I said, it definitely helped having a teammate and some people involved with the program last year who had done it in a couple of years past. And, moving forward to this year, I'm really fortunate. The group of guys I'm working with who I've got on my team have a lot of experience in racing in general, but also with the 200.
For our third inning stretch, some words provided by our sponsor. Picture this: you're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, and you're tuning up your engine with parts that you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease, and because you're committed to riding that thing farther than the odometer can even handle, you start thinking to yourself, you know what? I could probably also use some new brakes, maybe a shock. This baby deserves a new air filter. So you head straight back to eBay. You can find anything you need there. It's unreal, from headlights to air filters to exhaust systems, all the way to those carbon fiber rims you've been fantasizing about. eBay is the stocked garage of your dreams, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit, because eBay knows that DIY fixes can be major and mods are always intense. So you need to know those parts are guaranteed to fit every time. Before you dive in, wrench first. And on the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back. Simple as that. You know what you love more than your bike itself, and that is naturally riding it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance and locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay. Minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back on the road. And you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info to get the exact parts that fit. When you see that green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. Well, now that you know all of this, just imagine standing at that open garage door looking at the bike you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible. Whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been seen by humanity before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Now back to my conversation with Trevor Daley. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Racing is just an opportunity for things to go wrong. Sometimes that's how I think of racing. And I think of like the best guys in the world, say the Ferrari Formula One team. Like there's a guy that, and don't quote me on this, but there's a guy that does like the left rear wheel, and that's his career, and they still screw it up. And it happens all the time. Car wobbles out in three wheels, or they have to bring it back in or retighten it or something like this. So every time there's a pit stop, and in motorcycle racing, we don't, other than say endurance series, which are very, rare, there isn't this pit stop, and you're going to run two pit stops. And this is not something you do in the rest of your racing. Normally you go out like most guys, most pros, and you run 20 laps or something like that in a feature. But now you have to incorporate a bunch of extra people, a bunch of specialized equipment to get wheels on and off quickly. And it invites the opportunity for things to go wrong. Does that ever get into your head when you're on the track, or do you let that go?
Yeah, I don't think you can let the what ifs get in your head. They're going to happen regardless, right? And there's, you can only control what you can control. And same, it's I can control what I'm doing behind the bars. It's no different than the guy doing the front tire or the back tire or the fuel. They've got their job to do. And I think one thing I definitely recognized last year, and again, looking back through some previous years, is it's hard to gain time in the pit stop, but it would be very easy to lose time. It would be very easy to a small mistake turn into, not going, something that prevents you from going back out after the pit stop. So it was definitely, again, last year, some of the guys who were involved with the team, and again, this year, some of the guys, they've got a lot of experience. So it's, I just got to trust in them, and I do trust them. And, practice makes perfect. Last year we were really fortunate that a bunch of our crew was all Canadian guys. So we had an opportunity before we loaded the bikes up for, Ben and I and the guys to come to the shop and try out some stuff. Last year, again, not only being my first year racing it, but building all the pit equipment. Like you mentioned, you've got a lot of specialized stands and, the axles, the way the brakes mount, and there's a lot of particulars even to the bike that you build differently. Some, to put up with, the shit they're going to go through the race, but then also some that, aren't built purely for an outright lap time. They're not, the absolute lightest they could be, because that's really not what's going to be important when, if, you kind of build stuff, like I said, you can't prevent everything from happening, but, your thought process needs to be a little bit preventative, more so than outright performance. And again, we were really fortunate, or I was really fortunate that, the crew did an amazing job, and we got in and out of pit lane. And there's kind of a couple aspects to it. Daytona is really unique that, you come out of NASCAR 3 and 4 and into the tri-oval, and it flattens out, and pit lane on your left there is just a little speck. And, the grandstands and the scoring tower, everything is so massive that even though that big Sunoco fuel sign or whatever it is above the pit lane entrance is 20 feet across, it's small, and it's difficult to judge actually when you come off. And like I said, there's, your 11-second pit stop, there's your 15-second pit stop. As long as all the guys hit their marks, the two aren't necessarily going to be a make or break, because that entire time of when you come, off of the track into the flat to where you enter coming out of the International Horseshoe, which, some people might not be aware that you've got a pit speed limit. That pit speed limit doesn't start until you're actually on pit lane. That pit speed limit actually ends at the end of pit lane, but you continue not re-entering the track till, approximately 15 to 20 seconds later into the infield. And none of that has your pit speed limit. So like I said, there's your pit stop, there's all the specialty equipment and the practice and the hard work everyone does in that. But it's there's a lot more to it, right? It's not your 15-second pit stop. It's probably, over a minute, I would think, well over a minute in that entire time, to make right,
No, you said,
and like I said,
go ahead.
Like I said, really, it's there's obviously like a mindset of doing everything perfect. There's also a mindset which is really important that I learned last year, in that there's doing it perfect, there's not making mistakes, and both of them equate to a good result at the end of the race.
I mean, one thing you told me which I thought was really interesting, and I think most of us can relate to that, which is that when you're traveling at a high rate of speed, even just as a road rider, I mean, sometimes, you turn into a driveway after you've had a quick ride and it's like, woo. And you're saying you're coming down off this banking and you're turning into what feels, because of your speed and the scale of it, is like turning into a laneway. And then you have to judge, you're telling me that you've got to get slow enough that you go whatever your pit lane speed is, and the penalties are serious for pit lane speeding. So you have to slow your brain down and then get in. And now what is it from the time that you stop the bike until the time the bike moves again? Say you do fuel and front and rear wheels. What sort of time is that?
Well, the best time that we were getting last year was just over 11 seconds. And we were pretty consistent on that. So yeah, that's front and rear tire, and that's 19 liters of fuel in that amount of time. So definitely goes by quickly. Like obviously, there's a couple of particulars that are not allowed to fuel the bike while I'm on it. So one of the first thing, I'm obviously trying to hit my mark to get in to the front stand. And Again, like you mentioned, the front stand is kind of built a little bit as a guide. So I almost ride right into it and the bike goes up. And as soon as I, kind of feel the stands engaged, I kind of step off it. The fuel guy can come in. I'm looking for the guy with the water bottle, get a bit of a refresher kind of thing. And literally by the time I found that, the fuel, we're 4.3 seconds on 19 liters. So the fuel is actually one of the quicker things. And as soon as the fuel is done, I can get back on the bike and get in position and start the bike, because obviously the bike needs to be shut off for the fueling and the pit stop. So yeah, it goes by super quick. And again, whether it's 10, 11 seconds, even 20 seconds, it would definitely, cause I'm doing a few things, I've got my place in the pit stop too. Just like everybody. Right. So
last year was your first year running the 200, and I think you learned a lot. It was an eventful race for you. You got a good result. You were 20th out of a field of 60. Is that right? Nearly 60?
Yeah, I think there were 67 entrants and I believe 62 who made the time cut to start the race. So yeah, a big field. I was definitely happy. Ended up 20th. So yeah, for my first time, I was happy with that. That was kind of the goal. Obviously as a racer, you always want more. And there's, through the middle of the race, there's definitely had some good track position and, had a bit of an incident where it put us back a little bit and forced us to make another stop. But
okay, no, that's not talking euphemisms here. So that little incident was you crashed, correct?
And then I did, yeah.
You I got to hold you to it.
I'm trying to gloss over it.
It's my job. Sorry, my friend. So you had a crash, and then you put your bike into some hay bales and had to dig it out of the hay bales, correct?
Well, I think the marshals dug it out because the bike was actually running on top of me, and the bike your street bike has a sensor in it that if the bike falls over at a certain angle, the bike automatically cuts out. In the electronics that we run on this bike, it doesn't have that. So I kind of ended up in with the bike and the back tire spinning above me, and it kind of took everything, wrenching my one arm out to get up to hit the kill switch. And to be honest, as much as I was maybe thinking I don't want to lose my hand here in the chain or whatever, I was more thinking of I don't want the bike to run on the side for too long and start for oil, because I have every intention of starting this thing back up and going. But, by the time, the marshals had the bike off me and ran over and did an awesome job with that, and I kind of dug myself out of the air fence, they were pushing the bike the opposite way. And they were, I think, a little surprised when I ran over and hopped back on it and kind of pushed the tail section back down and was, restarting the thing. But again, like I mentioned, whether it's kind of how you build some of the stuff, if you ever have an incident, again, through some more of the longer endurance stuff I did with the car, we had, spare suspension, spare bodywork, spare everything prepared in the pit. Because what happens, especially in a 24-hour race, is wild, running through the night. It's, my first couple experiences with that were pretty crazy, but it was kind of the same thing. So, ended up, I had made a mistake earlier on that lap and clipped the curb really hard coming out of the chicane. And it was one of those things, out of the chicane, on the back straightaway, there's grass, on the left when you turn in the middle of the track on the right, and then back on the left when you come out. And throughout the weekend, you're getting on the gas and standing it up, and the bike would kind of wheelie kind of over the curb a little bit. And through the weekend, again, with the huge grid, and then also, the baggers and other classes, that grass got a little bit of a rut, and that rut turned into a bit of a hole. And the previous lap to the crash hit the front tire on it really hard. Could instantly feel the vibration. So I knew I had bent the front wheel, kept going around. I think I had about 4 laps to my next pit stop or when it was slated kind of thing. So I just kind of kept going, thinking that, okay, I can deal with the vibration and I know what's happened. I'll push through. I didn't really think that potentially the wheel was bent so bad that the tire started going down. And in the infield, they call it the kink. If you watch the event or watch some of the past ones, they're always referring to this really fast left-hander, and you're either topped in third gear or clicking up into fourth to go through it really, really fast. There's some bumps in it. And, I kind of went through that and had a huge moment on the front end, saved it on my knee, and kind of, a bit of a holy shit moment. Went into the next turn 5, clear from my head, and then went into turn 6 full tilt again, not putting it together that moment was caused by the tire going down. And as soon as I grabbed the brake, that was that. But again, it's I came in, obviously I'd gone by my pit board when that had happened last year. Front tire was flat. Even though you're going down the back straightaway on the apron, it's still, if you've ever ridden a bike with a flat or anywhere, low tire pressure, it's like, it seems so foreign, right? It feels so heavy. And anyways, I almost crashed again in the middle of chicane going, 15 miles an hour. But I got in, again, the guys didn't know what had happened. And they immediately got on it, got right to it and got some duct tape on the tail and some fresh tires on the fresh Bridgestones on it and back out on track.
I've always wondered with endurance racing and given the penalties that happen if you a tip over, your tire last year, your tire goes flat, hit the curb, tire goes flat, tip over. How do you determine how hard to go in a typical sprint race? You're giving it pretty much all you got, or you're managing your tire over a much narrower parameters, say 20 laps. Whereas this, because you've got pit stops, because you've got 3 times the usual race distance that you would run, is there a tendency? Can you run a 95% pace, or do you even think about it that way, knowing that if something happens that's your fault on track, that there go all the advantages from your fast pit stops, for instance? I mean, how do you manage risk versus reward?
Yeah, well, I think some of it is you need to have the confidence in your back pocket or in the back of your head that you've created the right scenario that like I said, in particular with the pit stops and the people you got involved with that you're going to be able to like I said, have that in your back pocket. It's going to be
so you're trying to remove something that could take your focus and take set that aside. So if you got good people and good gear.
Yeah. Right. So when it comes to like, there's 57 laps, do you ride all 57 like it's a qualifying lap? I think in years past, like I said, and going back and watching some of the races, there's been years that every lap has been a qualifying pace. Recently watching last year's race or rewatching it, and there was not a lap. Josh Herron, where they were covering him, was not on it. And, even late in the race, he had 6-7 second gap, which a lot of that